Hey everyone, Adrian from Audio Excellence Canada. Hope you're doing well. Vilip on my right, Alex behind everything, and so is Angus. Today we're going to do a review of the Apertura Sensa floor standing speakers. Apertura is a company that's been around for about 38 or 39 years. The interesting thing about the designer Christian Yvon is that he has been responsible for some truly remarkable speakers, including the Goldmund series of speakers. He's also done apparently crossover designs for Focal and some of the earlier Sonus Fabers as well. The Sensa is a two-way speaker using 6.3-inch mid-woofer or 16 centimeters. The woofer is made of woven polystyrene strips. I think what I'll do is I'll get Angus to overlay all the text because there's quite a few features about the product. The other thing that's interesting about Apertura is the crossover. So typically a speaker company, a designer will choose a crossover slope, say a first order, for example, like Thiel used to do that and Ben
that's
still
6
does,
dB per octave.
right? Or somebody will use a second or fourth order or even a third order. B&W used to use fourth order Butterworth. I don't know if they still do. In the case of Apertura, they use a mix of three filters. So the first order, and then it goes into second order, and then it goes into a fourth order. So it goes gradual, then a little bit steeper, and then really steep. This is something that Christian Yvon experimented with many decades ago, and now he's famous for this. The other thing that's interesting about the speaker is the enclosure. So he pays a lot of attention to making sure that the enclosure has the least amount of resonance possible by using 2 or 3 different kinds of absorption materials inside, and also the way the Sensa, if you look at the back of the Sensa, the cabinet, it has a curve which minimizes the amount of surface area on the back. And so
Well, it's also internally braced in
yes.
a way that's, makes it quite stiff.
There are 3 finishes available: satin cherry, or high gloss piano black, or white. We've got the piano black here at the store. Frequency range is 40 to 40,000 from a soft dome tweeter. That's impressive. Plus or minus 3 decibels. Sensitivity is 87 dB. 8 ohm nominal impedance, so it should be easy to drive. It's bass reflex. Crossover frequency is 3.8 kilohertz, which is pretty high for a two-way. And the dimensions are 210 millimeters by 260 millimeters by 921, or 8.27 inches wide by 10.24 inches deep by 36.26 high. Weight is approximately 14 kilograms or 30.8 pounds. Price in piano black or white gloss is 4,300 Canadian. In satin American walnut, cherry, or light oak, it's 4,500. So 43 or 45 Canadian. All right, Vilip, take it away. What do you think?
Well, at first I hated it. I mean, Angus set it up in the front room, which is a small room. I set it up
wrong, and the room was too small.
The room is, it has a very high ceiling, but the room is small. And since the speaker is supposedly designed for small European condos, we thought, hey, that should work. It didn't. And it didn't really improve, despite having 2 other amplifiers hooked up to it. So obviously, in almost near field, in a small room, I don't know. It just didn't sound right. It was overly smooth. There wasn't enough detail. That was it. It was overly smooth. We were just kind of lifeless. I did try Hagel with it. We hooked up Hagel H190 to it, and it wasn't enough. It was better, but it wasn't enough. And then, of course, you decided let's do a review on it, and I was hesitant, but we put it into the home theater room, which is a bigger room, and the be quiet. Shh. Anyways, we put it in the bigger room. And more out into the room, not like we would normally have it as close to the wall as the Wilson dictate tells us to do. in the home theater room, we have a salamander cabinet that's close to the wall, and that necessitates pulling the speakers out, which actually helped this speaker. And then it was transformed. I guess it's super placement sensitive. Then, I hated it, and then I really liked it. I really, really liked it. We used H390 to drive it.
Hagel H390.
Hagel H390, the mid-size Hagel. Extremely good match. The speaker was just transformed. Everything that I didn't like about it disappeared. What can I say about the speaker? It has a focus and density that you wouldn't think would come out of such a small box. It was effortless with the H390. It had what's the word? There's a coherency to the speaker, and then I did some research, and I found out that the crossover point was 3800, and that the crossover slope, is defined in 3 different ways, so that the transition to the tweeter is seamless in a way that I've never heard. But because the woofer works all the way up to 3800 hertz, mostly what you're hearing is that woofer, and it's extremely well put together so that you don't hear any kind of crossover notches. There's no phase issue where it crosses over. Usually designs like that can be crossed over as low as 2000 hertz, which is in kind of in the upper mid-range treble crossover area, and this speaker extends way beyond that. I've had lots of experience with single driver speakers, and to me this sounds like a just much better version of a single driver speaker. In the previous video I mentioned the Morrison speaker, and the Morrison speaker is crossed over at 4500 hertz, and it uses a first order crossover, which is in essence simply a capacitor, and the transition is extremely smooth. The way that Don Morrison has put that speaker together, it's interesting, right? It's very, very, very simple. And even though the Apertura is not super simple, it sounds that way. It sounds, because it's not fighting itself. Mostly you're hearing the woofer, and then you have that really delicate extension into the top end, and it just extends forever. And the woofer is actually going down. You hear 40 hertz out of that box. Because I was playing stuff, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? It's going pretty deep, and it's powerful, and it has weight and impact, and it has texture. You just get lost in it. I was just getting lost in it. I played my 80s playlist. No, it's important because it's terribly recorded music for the most part, even though a lot of it's remastered. And the one thing you hear with that playlist when you play it through this speaker has enough forgiveness. In other words, it's not really ultimately about maximum resolution. It's about portraying music. It's musical, but it's revealing enough to tell you everything that's wrong about what you're hearing, but not in an unpleasant way. So, for instance, with most of my 80s playlists, there's a lot of reverb that they use, and you can hear it. You can hear a kind of certain hollowness about it, and then you begin to question, is it because the speaker sounds hollow? And you think that's not a good thing. And then you play like really well recorded music, and all of that disappears. So the speaker obviously is giving you more detail than you're used to, but it's not forward or bright or any of those other catchphrases those words that we like to use when we don't like something. It doesn't have that. It's like it's laid back. It's extremely detailed. It's very revealing. It's very insightful. It's quite neutral, but it has a bit of forgiveness. But it's not. It's rich but barren at the same time. I don't know how else to describe it, because it has all the texture, it plays all the notes, but it doesn't embellish in any way. There is no like inherent beauty in it, but it doesn't sound harsh. So is that a way of describing neutrality? And
I'm totally confused now. All of you who have just listened to what Vilip has said, if you agree with me, comment below. I have no idea what he just said. It's barren and rich at the same time. No, I'm just teasing
it's
you.
just truthful.
Yeah.
But it's not like we listen to the Acora, and the Acora can be a bit brutal. And this the Apertura is not brutal. It's quite joyful, but it's not beautiful in the way that Sonus Faber is. Sonus Faber has this tonality and resonance about it that when you listen to female voices, it just sounds like, it is probably the most beautiful thing you've ever heard. This Apertura does not have that kind of presence, but at the same time, it is forgiving. But it's still neutral. So there's this dichotomy here. There's definitely more going on in the speaker than you can give it. When you look at it, you wouldn't figure that it would do that.
Yeah. So first impressions, when you look at the speaker, you wouldn't think much of it because it's a small
tiny.
speaker.
It's tiny.
It's a small little floor standing speaker. Maybe Alex can take a picture of somebody standing beside it so you get an idea of how small these speakers are. So it should, in theory, work in a small apartment because that apparently was what it was designed for. As is normal for me, when we do these videos, I try not to learn about the product first. Try to listen to it first, and then make notes about the product for the video so you guys can get an idea of what the specs are and so on. So I didn't know about the crossovers and all this stuff. All I knew was my listening impressions. So when the speakers were first set up in the small room at the front, I would occasionally walk by, hear some music playing and go, oh, it sounds very, very smooth. And then walk around and do my business and things like this. Then when we finally had the speakers set up in the what we call the theater room, I spent some time listening yesterday, and my first impressions were very, very smooth. In fact, I immediately harkened back to, I would say, earlier British speakers like in the 70s and 80s type of speakers like the Harbus and Spenders and so on of that time. Smooth, reasonably forgiving, not in your face, but with the difference that they were transparent, that the earlier British speakers were not. They were more dynamic than the earlier speakers were not. Earlier British speakers were not. In that kind of a flavor, it had that kind of flavor. That was yesterday. Then this morning I came in very early to listen, and I made sure that the amps were nice and cranked. I've been on for all night and were nice and toasty, and I cranked it for another half an hour or so before I listened to it. I started with Gregory Porter, God Bless the Child, and then I decided to play Billie Holiday's version because, typical of me, when I hear something, my mind immediately starts going to something else. And what's fascinating, Billie Holiday is one of my favorite singers of all time. She has this phrasing and ability to the overused phrase of making it your own. Well, she makes every song her own. I've never heard anybody make music come to life like she does. And she was in the room. And for years and years and years, this has always been my barometer. Can the system make me believe that my favorite artists are playing just for me? And the Sensa is able to do that. And even though this recording was done in the 40s and so on, the recording noise is not obtrusive. So while it was able to give me that emotion, the feeling of being there with her, the recording noise is not obtrusive, which says that it's not focusing or exaggerating certain frequencies that would bother me. Then I played Mumford & Sons, There Will Be Time, beautiful recording, big white soundstage. And in fact, the soundstage was beyond the speakers, which is quite nice. You don't always get that with a lot of speakers. This one does. Then I played Fever, just again to try different kinds of music. Fever by Malia and Boris Blank. Very punchy. Well, I wouldn't say very. Punchy, pretty dynamic, nice 3D soundstage. And then I played Chris Steele and Edgar Meyer, Tarnation. So they're playing a double bass with a mandolin. And again, for those of you who have Tidal, check this cutout. It's really quite nice. Great separation, beautiful tone, a wonderful bass sound when he plays his bow against the strings. For audiophiles among you, you're going to really love that. And then finally, I played a video on YouTube. Suddenly, it came out of nowhere. So about 13, 14 years ago, around that time, I happened to come across a YouTube video called Stand By Me, Playing for Change. That's the company that did the recording. And it's basically a compilation. They went around different parts of the world and recorded musicians and put them together playing this song. And some of the musicians are street musicians. So if you haven't watched this, definitely check out this video. It's wonderful. And for those of you that know what I'm talking about, please comment and tell me if you like it. Anyway, the first time I watched the video all those years ago, I cried. I was like, oh my God, this is spectacular. It was so beautiful. So I watched it again 13, 14 years later, and I cry. I'm watching this on my YouTube, on my cell phone, and I'm playing the music through the speakers, and it's so beautiful. Grandpa Elliot, I don't know who he is. He appears to be a street musician. He's blind. He steals the show. Just absolutely stunning. So they have all these musicians from all over the world, but there's no Asians. Shame on you. No Asians. Or maybe we're just, not very good. Okay. However, so here are the cons. Actually, why don't Vilip, do you have any cons? You want to start with that first?
Well, we tend to, working here, you tend to like extremely musical presentations, but at the same time, we want a certain level of, or we demand a certain level of neutrality out of it so that it's not embellished. And the one thing I noticed with this speaker is that it is quite neutral, but it does have this kind of weird coloration. I don't know if you would call it a coloration, but I noticed it with every track. And it's just very, very exciting. It's very energetic. And I was reacting to every song in kind of the same way, which is that, I could feel the hair standing on the back of my neck, that kind of thing. It was always present. I could feel a kind of like resonance in my chest on every song. And
even Bananarama.
I only played snippets of Bananarama, but I played other stuff like Nowhere Girl by, you guys can look it up. I love that song. There's lots of 80s tracks I played. The one thing I did notice is that I was playing some songs a lot longer than I normally do. I'm now almost hearing the entire song, which we generally don't do because we know these tracks so well. We use them all the time. We only listen to, 30 seconds, a minute, maybe a minute and a half. And here I was listening to like 5 minutes of a song, which took a very long time to get through my playlist to make sure I heard everything. So with every song, there was just a kind of a heightened tension about this speaker that made it very, very, very immediate, almost like a coloration, but not exactly a coloration. So some people will not like that.
It's like listening to Name.
Yeah, a little bit, but with way more dimensionality and
in the sense that it's got that rhythmic
the
characteristic.
Pratt thing.
Always
Definitely, this speaker does it.
Yeah.
So what's your con?
Oh, so for a long time now, I've been thinking Vilip and I are too similar, and we need to find somebody who can come in and give us a different perspective. And I was thinking, how people say when you get married for a long time, husband and wife tend to be. Well, I'm finally glad that I think we've got a difference. Throughout the listening process, if I were playing acoustic music, it was wonderful. Then I started playing rock. And then suddenly I realized that I didn't enjoy it as much. So, for example, I played Cream, Stormy Monday from the Royal Albert Hall Live at Robert 2005 album. So imagine 3 legendary rockers, right? You have Eric Clapton, you have Ginger Baker, you have Jack Bruce. And at that time of recording, Clapton was 60 years old. I'm 50, 56 this year? 57? My God.
56.
4 more years, I'll be like Eric Clapton, who was at that time, but far less accomplished. Anyway, when I listen to this cut, I'm thinking, it sounds like old people playing. There was not that vibrancy and energy and excitement. I was thinking, good playing, but almost safe. These
Really?
are rockers. These are like, 3 of the acid rockers, psychedelic rockers of the 60s. So, of course, as soon as I did that, I had to play Rolling Stones. And Stones were better, but not great. And then I tried Foo Fighters. So Everlong, the original version, the electric version, and it was good. Vilip mentioned tension, a lot of tension, wonderful, but still somehow missing something that I know I'm used to. So then I decided to play the acoustic version of Everlong. So I don't think they ever released it, but it's on YouTube. And when you listen to the acoustic version, it's like to die for. It's like, wow, this is so nice. And I'm not sure what it is about the speakers. So then I thought, okay, since they're about $4,500, let's put in the Sonus Faber equivalent, which is the Sonetto 3. And they're roughly about the same size and roughly about the same price. I think the Sonetto is about $5,000 thereabouts. Anyway, on balance, I prefer the Sonus Faber. It has seemingly more airiness. It's not quite as coherent. That's one thing I will give to the
That's the thing you notice about it is that
I keep wanting to call it the Sonetto.
It's really well put together.
The Sensa. The Sensa is more coherent. It does sound more like a single driver speaker, but with nice tweeters. It's like it's the. But in terms of the overall presentation, I actually overall prefer the Sonus Faber for my taste. And this is where we come down to speakers are very personal. You got to listen to it yourself and see what you think. In this case, we own those speakers, so we can say whatever we want. I don't know if Richard will be happy with this video, but on balance, I prefer the Sonus Faber for my taste of the kind of music that I like. I like both orchestral to acoustic to rock to crazy stuff. And yeah, overall, I would say I prefer the Sonus Faber. But I can see why Vilip likes the Sensa. It does have some wonderful qualities. And it can play loud because of the way the crossover works.
Oh, I was playing it pretty loud.
Yeah, it can play
very
pretty
loud.
Yeah,
I had to haggle up at like 75 most of the time.
I cried uncle at 60.
Oh,
Yeah.
I had it at 75.
Yeah. Angus, what did you think?
I had similar thoughts to you, as in like the type of music. So when I played it, I started with Gregory Porter, musical genocide.
We're gonna ban Gregory Porter next.
I found that with more acoustic recordings, it was very, very good. As you said, super smooth, pretty coherent in terms of dynamics, bass response. Personally, I listen to a lot of like 90s rap and like hip hop, so things like Tupac, Biggie, Wu-Tang, like Nujabes. And I found that with some of the hip hop stuff, obviously this stuff isn't like super well recorded, but it didn't give that kind of punch that I like out of those songs. And then there's this one track that me and Alex both like from the Final Fantasy VII remake soundtrack. It's called where is it? Let the Battles Begin. And this is like a super dynamic orchestral track where there's a lot of things going on. It's like you're entering a battle kind of sound. And I found that some of the details were a little bit muddled in this track, because one of the speakers I listened to this track on, and I really enjoyed it, was the chorus, where it's super transparent, and then you can hear everything where it is. You can hear where everyone's sitting, in the orchestra. And I really like that. With the Aperturas, I found it a little bit kind of veiled, where the details weren't exactly coming out the way I liked it. And then another track I listened to was Contact by Daft Punk. This track isn't like super musical or anything. There's a lot of like weird stuff going on here. And I found that in the song builds and builds and builds, like throughout the song in terms of how loud it gets, in terms of dynamics and how much stuff is going on. And I found that as the song went on, it kind of sounded slightly more compressed as it kept building, which was a little odd, but I felt that it just had trouble doing highly, highly detailed music. Even though these tracks aren't like the cream of the crop in terms of recording, but I've heard them sound very different on other speakers.
Well, to be fair, tell everybody how much the Acoras cost.
Well, the cheapest Acoras are 19 grand.
The least expensive. Let's choose our words carefully.
Yeah.
Is it 19? I thought it was more.
No, it's 19.
For the SRBs.
Yeah.
Without the stands.
Yeah.
And
without the stand.
with the SRC ones,
Yes.
they're
36.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
As opposed to $4,300.
Yeah.
So
So
to be fair,
it isn't
there's
exactly
a
a
slight
fair
difference
comparison.
in price. Yes.
But
you notice that Adrian compared it to a speaker that was almost the same price.
that's true. But yeah, overall, I think it's very good. It's just, for me, the type of music that I personally listen to, I found it a little bit veiled. Yeah.
Well, also, having heard what Alex was saying and what Vilip is saying, one thought that came to mind as they were talking was that when you work in a store like this, you can also get very spoiled very quickly, because we are so lucky to have access to such a range of products. And so when a product is quote unquote not as good as the big stuff that we have, you lose sight of what's the word, relevant? No, not relevant. Fair, I guess. Anyway, I don't know if this video is helpful. All I can tell you is that there are pros and cons for all of us. On balance, I really like the speaker. I prefer the Sonus Faber myself. Vilip really likes the speaker, and I can see why. It's a great speaker in many, many ways.
I actually didn't find it bad with anything.
Yeah.
I didn't hear any of what you heard. I found actually that it was,
But you like Bananarama. That rules everything out. It disqualifies you from everything.
I also like Depeche Mode,
See?
New Order.
See?
I can go on and on.
Rick Astley.
Rick Astley, Orchestral Maneuvers.
Yeah, George Michael. Although
George Michael.
George Michael is cool. I like George Michael.
I like Wham. I was a big Wham fan when he first came
that
out.
draws the line. No, when with Careless Whisper,
Andrew
that's it.
Ridgeley.
No, that's
I mean, Tears for Fears.
Tears for Fears is pretty good.
I literally have an 80s playlist with more or less about 100 obscure 80s tracks.
Anyway, we got to get going. Adrian from Audio Excellence in Canada, Vilip, Angus, Alex. Please like, subscribe, turn on notification, and also, by the way, I'm told to say this: our social media, follow us if you'd like, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye bye.